Donald Trump's federal court appearance is complete in Miami, and now the former president and 2024 presidential hopeful is headed back to New Jersey to speak with supporters. Good evening. I'm Tiffany Kenny.
And I'm Felicia Rodriguez. Thank you for joining us. Trump left his Doral resort early this afternoon, arriving to the courthouse in Miami, greeted by supporters. He spent about 2 hours inside the federal courthouse, where his attorney entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. No cameras were allowed inside the courtroom, but we did receive sketches from Trump's court appearance. We have live team coverage of today's historic appearance.
Let's start things off with our co-anchor Todd McDermott, who joins us live from the courthouse where the former president appeared earlier today. Todd?
Tiffany, Felicia, it is official. It is history making. Again, former President Trump now a federal criminal defendant charged with those 37 counts, federal crimes and all. His attorney, Todd Blanche, made for him. As you mentioned, Donald Trump said nothing during this arraignment today. He was in the courtroom for over 45 minutes. His lawyers, as expected, asked for a jury trial, something they would prefer. Former president was processed and booked as a criminal defendant at the federal courthouse here in Miami downtown. He was at the courthouse itself for almost 2 hours in all. No mugshot. He was not handcuffed, but ABC News reports he was processed like any other criminal defendant, that is, fingerprinted, giving his name and social security number to authorities. He did not have to give his passport. They said he was not a flight risk. Federal prosecutors accused him of mishandling those documents containing national defense secrets, hiding them from the FBI, and even lying about possessing them also to the federal government. Special counsel Jack Smith was in the courtroom today. Trump did not make eye contact with him, said nothing to Jack Smith. After the arraignment, Donald Trump stopped by the famous Versailles Cuban restaurant, Little Havana, on his way to the airport. That was a campaign stop planned in advance following this arraignment, following his indictment. He took photos with people, spoke briefly about his court appearance and about the case against him.
I think it's going great. I think it's a rigged deal here. We have a rigged country. We have a country that's corrupt. We have a country that's got no borders. We have a country that's got nothing but problems. We're a nation in decline, and then they do this stuff.
And to be clear, the first thing he said was, it's going great. He meant the criminal case. Outside the courthouse, heightened security as expected. Miami police had said there would be, in anticipation of perhaps thousands of demonstrators. We did see a man dressed in a prison jumpsuit, not a supporter of Trump, holding a sign that said, "Lock him up." He got in the street right in front of the motorcade as it was leaving. It was quickly taken away by officers. Again, all this happened after Donald Trump had called on his supporters to come en masse to Miami to show their support for him. In fact, there were reports that busloads of people would come in from Orlando, but they were expecting thousands. That was not the case today here in downtown Miami. Taylor Hernandez is with me here at the courthouse. And Taylor, you spoke to people. Again, there were people right on the corner lining the streets to cheer Trump as his motorcade came into the courthouse.
Todd, that's correct. The biggest crowds that we saw were when that motorcade was coming in and when that motorcade was leaving. So just about 2 o'clock this afternoon and just about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Things here have really calmed down since then. After the former president left, a lot of his supporters did as well. You drew attention to it. I would like to call attention to it as well. We were expecting thousands of supporters or protesters out here this afternoon. We saw several hundred, but law enforcement was prepared for a much bigger response. We saw Secret Service and members from various Florida law enforcement agencies, of course, Miami police here as well. There was a brief threat that media had to be cleared of this scene for about 11 o'clock this morning. It turned out to be nothing. Everybody was able to come back just about 20 minutes later, but people from both sides of the aisle making their voices heard. Some believe this is a witch hunt. It is illegal. Others believe this indictment is just, and it's showing our Justice Department and our justice system doing what it should, holding everyone to the same standard. Take a listen from two men that I spoke with here today.
I haven't had any tension, none at all. Yeah, they ignore me, I ignore them. A couple people said, "I don't agree with you, I feel sorry for you." I said, "I don't feel sorry for you. This is what America's all about."
Everybody's seemed to get along just fine, and it's been a peaceful assembly.
There's been a little bit of counter protesting, but it's not too bad, you know. And I mean, it's kind of lighthearted.
Again, things here have really calmed down. The former president left and went to Little Havana, to a restaurant there, for a campaign appearance. After he left, a lot of supporters and the major crowds here did as well. Folks lining the streets when he arrived and when he left. But things here much calmer now at the federal courthouse in Miami than they were just a few hours ago.
All right. Thank you very much, Taylor. Again, after leaving the courthouse, making a quick stop at Cafe Versailles, Trump went to the Miami airport and his plane took off bound for New Jersey. There were no large protests, no violence to speak of today. We watched the plane take off. That was just before 5 p.m. Again, he has a rally scheduled for tonight at his Bedminster Golf Club. Now, Donald Trump, the first sitting or former U.S. president to be federally indicted for crimes. 37 in all in this case, as you know. Terry Parker joins me now from the courthouse with two very different views on whether this case against Trump is politically motivated. Terry?
Todd, among the Trump supporters here today who say this indictment is nothing more than a political ploy designed to bring down Donald Trump was conservative favorite Kari Lake, the former Republican candidate for governor of Arizona. As the former president arrived here at the federal courthouse in his motorcade around 2 p.m., Lake was making the rounds of the media set up here to cover the arraignment. I did talk to her about what she believes this is all about, and I told her that some legal analysts we've talked to say the special counsel is not biased against Trump, and that one indication is that he chose Florida to bring charges, which is perceived as a more favorable state to Trump than Washington, D.C.
Well, I mean, this is where Mar-a-Lago is. This is where the raid happened, the despicable raid. It's just, I don't believe that theory. I'll tell you that. We know what's happening. This is what, the 15th, 16th, 17th witch hunt, Russiagate, we had that. And what it does is it allows the media to talk about something disparaging about Trump for months on end.
It's not just Donald Trump that has a special counsel. It's also Joe Biden. They're investigating him. So if you say this is political, you're either not paying attention or you're just acting in bad faith like Kari Lake is.
Two very different viewpoints, to be sure, and it remains to be seen how these very serious charges looming over Donald Trump will impact him, first of all, in the Republican primary, and if he wins the nomination in the eventual presidential election. Live in Miami, I'm Terry Parker. Todd, back to you.
All right, Terry, thank you very much. Trump currently, again, the front runner for the GOP nomination for 2024, as we know. Political experts say this federal indictment will have far-reaching impact both on that campaign for the nomination as well as the general election, and maybe even the presidency itself, depending on what happens and whether there is a trial in a year or more from this point on. Steve King joins me now from Mar-a-Lago with that's where, of course, the classified documents were seized by the FBI last August. They are the crux of this federal case against Donald Trump. And here's a look at how the Trump campaign is being affected now. Steve?
Todd, political experts say that this federal indictment is already generating more support for former President Donald Trump in the Republican primary, but it's too early to tell what impact it would have in the general election if Trump were to win the Republican nomination. Now, Charles Zeldin, a professor of history and politics at Nova Southeastern University, says if Trump wins the nomination, he could have to alter his current message about the indictment in some way in order to gain more moderate or independent voters. At this point, Trump is saying the federal investigation is baseless and politically motivated. Zeldin thinks the evidence is pointing to many potential voters being swayed against Trump, though it's still too early to know for sure. As for Democrats' message throughout the court case, Zeldin thinks they'll say something like this.
The grand jury looked at the evidence, felt that there was probable cause that Trump had broken the law. Now it's up to the courts to deal with it, and otherwise we have nothing to say. And they'll basically just sit quiet and let the situation play out, let the process be their argument.
Now, Zeldin says that if Trump is elected president, he could get the case dropped by appointing a new attorney general, but the Senate would have to confirm that appointment. Also, if Trump is convicted and elected, he could potentially pardon himself. Todd.
That's Steve King of Mar-a-Lago. Steve, thank you. And again, should Donald Trump be convicted on some of these charges, he could face a sentence that would mean years in federal prison, as opposed to fines or something else. Before heading to court today, Donald Trump arrived in Doral to his golf club yesterday. That's where dozens of supporters turned out again to greet him when he arrived. I was there yesterday with our Angela Rozier, who's there now as well. And Angela, a far different scene today at Doral.
Most definitely that heavy police presence is gone, and so are the supporters for the former President Donald Trump. But that was not the case a few hours ago. This is video that we shot earlier this afternoon here outside Trump National Golf Club in Doral. Supporters showing up with their flags and messages for Trump. They were hoping to see him wave at them as he left his resort, heading for the federal courthouse for his arraignment related to unclassified documents case. They tell me they feel that the former president is being treated unfairly.
I believe what they're doing to him is very wrong. It's never done. This has never been done to any other president in the history of the United States. And just to tell people that if you truly love this country, you should vote for Trump again.
Now, we also received this video showing Trump and his son Eric walking on the grounds of the resort before going to the federal courthouse earlier today. We understand the U.S. Secret Service worked with the police department here in Doral as well as Miami-Dade to make sure that the resort was secure. We also have been told we have not seen any protesters today, and there were no issues at all. Todd.
All right, Angela, thank you. We should mention again here that Walt Nauta, the indicted co-conspirator in this case, did not enter a plea today, but he was in court. He arrived with Donald Trump at the court, but they rode separately. Donald Trump now on his way, as we've been saying, to Bedminster, New Jersey. He'll land at Newark Airport, make his way to his golf club where he stays during the summer. There is a rally tonight. He also expects to speak to his supporters, and they'll be raising campaign money at the same time. And back to the other documents cases still being talked about. President Joe Biden, as you heard from State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg, there's still a special counsel there. Former Vice President Mike Pence as well. That case is closed. Both running for election in 2024. They've been under investigation to see if they mishandled documents found at their homes. Prosecutors say the cases differ from Trump's case because both men cooperated in full with federal law enforcement, even calling them to tell them they had the documents and returned what they had. This case alleges Trump did the opposite of that, hiding and even lying about having the documents. That's the allegation in this case. Documents were found in the Pence home in Indiana and at a Biden former office, as well as his Delaware home. The investigation recently wrapped up into the Pence allegations. DOJ does not plan to charge Mike Pence. After his court appearance, Donald Trump did post on social media saying, "Thank you, Miami. Such a warm welcome on such a sad day for our country." We'll continue to follow any new developments in this case from now and through the evening as well. Live from the federal courthouse in Miami, I'm Todd McDermott. Let's go back to Tiffany and Felicia.
Todd, thank you.